All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're not familiar with Maker Maven or who we are, so Maker Maven is a full service maker STEAM education company. So we not only help provide our educators with the tools to help facilitate your STEM and maker needs, but we also we help beyond that as well with moving forward with resources, curriculum, integrations, or even if it's just to talking about new and exciting ideas that you may have as educators. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Matt Garcia. I am co-owner, co-founder, CEO, CFO, all of the above of Maker Maven, along with my wife, Jamie Garcia, who is not able to join us today. And I also have with us our Director of Marketing and Brand Communications, Brianna Kua. She will be here helping me facilitate the chat for the beginning of the webinar. So before we really get started and start getting into things, I want to go over a few housekeeping rules for those of you that may not have joined us in the past. So we do encourage our webinars and our attendees to be highly engaged and interactive with us during the presentation. But since this is in a webinar format, we do not have the microphones or cameras enabled at this point. Later on, when we do a Q&A session, depending on time restrictions that we may have, I can enable microphones so we can ask our questions to our speaker directly today. But throughout the entire presentation, do not hesitate to use the chat function or the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll get your questions answered as soon as we can. Again, be highly engaged. And if you're not familiar with Maker Maven, we provide tons of great free resources that you can find on all of our social media platforms. So that's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Pinterest. You can get us at Maker Maven, at Maker_Maven, or you can email us at orders@makermaven.net. But without further ado, I would love to introduce our special guest today. We have Annie Schmidt. She's a STEM educator and teaching artist in Erie, Pennsylvania. She's here to teach us a little bit about how she utilizes UBTECH's UKITs with her students. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Annie, and we can get started.
Thank you, Matthew. All right, make sure this is all looking. Welcome to everybody. Thank you for coming. All right, well, I'll start off introducing myself. My name is Annie Schmidt. I'm a STEM educator and teaching artist located in Erie, Pennsylvania. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, so if I throw out a yins in there, you'll know why. And I'm really happy to be here today with UBTECH and Maker Maven to talk about UKITs and some of the other UBTECH education products. So I've been in the STEAM maker education space since about 2012 in a number of different roles. I've been a classroom teacher in urban middle school for science and STEM and robotics. And a role that I've had ongoing for about a decade is that of a teaching artist with media arts primarily, so animation, film, and incorporating coding with that as well. So I go to a lot of different schools and I co-teach with teachers in the classroom and help them to integrate arts and technology into their core curriculum. So I really was attracted to STEM and the arts for my students just because they're hands-on, they're relevant to, they allow all students, even, whether they struggle with traditional classroom learning or not, to participate fully and meaningfully. And they're really what I call sticky experiences, right? They'll remember building a robot, they'll remember making something really cool and what they learned around that. And another thing I really stress as an educator is just bringing play back into learning for all ages of students. And I work with students K through 12. Primarily, I work with late elementary and middle school, but I have worked with students of all ages. And then you'll hear me talk a little bit about arts integration. I do think STEM has a place for the arts in it, besides just a vehicle for personal expression, as a way to demonstrate knowledge for those other subjects of your science, engineering, math, and things like that. And I'll show a few or talk about a few examples of how my students have done that. And as we go, please, we can take questions as you go. So if you have a question in the chat, Matt, please interrupt me and we'll talk about it right away.
I'll do that for sure.
Thank you. So just a big, broad overview, life as a STEM educator. It's tough to be any type of educator right now. We'll talk a little bit about the challenges of being a STEM educator in particular. But really my educational philosophy and kind of my goals for my students are summed up with this New Yorker cartoon. And I'll admit I shamelessly stole this from a teaching artist friend of mine, Kelly Armour. This is a John O'Brien New Yorker cartoon. And my educational philosophy is basically finding that Frisbee. What is that Frisbee that will get my students to work together and to take the lead, right? The educators in the kind of standing back and letting students take the lead. So those are my goals. And what student success looks like for me is a number of different things. I'm sure we're all right there as STEM educators that 21st century skills are extremely important for our students. So technology literacy, media literacy, but even more so critical thinking, collaboration, problem solving, being able to develop those mindsets that will give them success now and through the rest of their lives. STEM is also extremely important for the diversity and of career pathways, right, for all students. And particularly, I try to reach those underrepresented students in the STEM fields, so girls and students of color that maybe haven't seen themselves in those roles before, to really start to see themselves as an engineer or a mathematician or a technologist or a scientist or a coder. So I'm looking to develop those 21st century skills, develop awareness of STEM careers, and really develop confidence in that they could do those projects or they could take it further into a career. In terms of big picture challenges, particularly for STEM, there's not always a clear curriculum, and I'm sure it varies by state and by school. When I was a classroom teacher and I taught a STEM elective, I had no curriculum given to me, which as a creative person, there's certain things that were attractive. I can make it whatever I want, but there's a limit to my time and energy as an educator. So there's only so much I can create on my own. So being able to find things that really are that all-in-one solution really help to, build those building blocks and scaffold up throughout the year or the years that I have my students. And then the other challenge as a STEM educator, I think, is just when you're doing hands-on learning, there's a few specific challenges. When you have 25 to 30 students in a class and maybe multiple classes per day using that, you want materials that are long lasting and they look good and they work well and they can be well organized, because they're going to take a beating. Things are going to get misused. Things are going to be stepped on, all of that. So really looking for things that my students can use over time as well, as far as the materials go, that I'm not just going to build classroom routines and get my students to know how to use that material for a week and then we're done. I'm really trying to find those things that we can use for multiple units or longer periods of time or in different grade levels. And sometimes that can be difficult in the STEM classroom. So moving from the bigger picture, how UBTECH and UKITs have fit into my education, they're just a tool in my backpack that I've come back to three different ways that I'll talk about, but kind of again and again. And I built the Scorpion for this webinar because this is one of my favorite models that we built with my students. So this is from the UKIT beginner. So that is the one on the far left, and that comes with 4 motors. And I'll talk a little bit more about the motors, but they're one of the nicest things about these kits. So super fun models. And for an example, whenever we built the Scorpion model, we talk a lot about biomimicry and animal adaptations. So students would study a real world example of how engineers use biomimicry. I know there's been a biotechnology octopus that it's almost like a squishy robot that can move into and do things like cave diving that would be dangerous for humans. So we talk about biomimicry, and then we look at an animal, draw that animal, look at how it moves, and then basically get to build that and kind of translate it into a robot, including with the motion. So we have our stinger here. So that's the scorpion. We might look at that again in a minute. So I'll kind of talk about 4 different sections for how UBTECH meets my goals. Again, starting with the hardware. So you just saw the one model. Everything's super functional and organized. The kits come with a lot of pre-built models. I don't know the exact numbers. Nick would know that. But I think for the beginner, it had 13 pre-built models. And there's step-by-step directions that students can zoom in, zoom out, look at different angles so they have that 360-degree view. And then it's really flexible enough that students can build whatever they want as well once they have gone through a few models. I'll talk a little more about the software in the next couple slides, but there's some really nice things about that. I've used it on Chromebooks and then also on tablets with my students. And some students have even downloaded the app to their phones to use because they enjoyed coding so much. They went home and coded and then brought it back to school. But you don't need the internet once the app is downloaded. They just function with Bluetooth. And then in terms of the motors that I mentioned, different than other kits that I've seen, the functionality of the motors is really nice because one, they have really high torque. So you actually can get your robot to lift things that are heavier than you would expect for a kit like this. And then they can connect right to each other. So with my scorpion tail, I have 2 axes of rotation there. So because the motors can click right into each other, so they're small, and you can also daisy chain them, meaning the motors can click into each other so they don't all have to go back to the main control box. And for my students, that just allows them to have a little more flexibility in how they build and kind of spread out their model or build the model a bit bigger with the way that the motors work. In terms of the curriculum, it was very easy to integrate into virtual learning and into the classroom. It uses the next generation science standards, and there's different units for each level. And what I really liked about it was it used the engineering design process throughout. So we really, talked about prototyping and thinking like an engineer. And then the real world examples, like I mentioned with biomimicry or robots that help to rescue, there's lots of those connections for students to see how an engineer would have this problem, how, the job of engineers really is to help people and to solve problems. How would they make a robot to do that? And then how can we make a similar robot so that you have an inspiration and a jumping off point? And then also in the curriculum, the way that it used artificial intelligence throughout was really helpful. I found it really interesting. I learned as much as the students did. I didn't know a whole lot about artificial intelligence before, but that was kind of woven in throughout the curriculum. And then in terms of differentiators, so things that really stood out to me, I mentioned a few, and I'll point out a couple more with the software, but the motors, the software, this 360-degree view when students are building makes it super seamless for everyone to build at their own pace. And then just the fact that I know I've been using the beginner kits, but I could have my students move up to the intermediate kits or the advanced kits at a higher grade level or in another semester, and not repeat the same things, but still be familiar with the platform and then get introduced to new curriculum integrations and new other things. So next, I just wanted to touch on a few things that really stuck out to me from the software. So the UCode app, it has the models where students build, and then they also code from there. So this is an example of the 360-degree view and what that looked like when my students built the Scorpion model. So this worked very well, especially in virtual environment, because I didn't have to, always hold things up super close up to the camera and say, no, the piece goes here. That once we did our intro lesson, could kind of set students loose and we'd just build at our own pace. But if there was a specific step they were stuck on, they would just call out the number. I would screen share that, and then we could, look at different views and zoom in if we needed to. So it really just made sure that all my students could be successful when we built the models. Then when it comes to coding, this is actually an example of 3 different ways that students could code the same actions on the Scorpion robot. And this really helps me whenever I have students who have never coded before, along with students who have more experience. If we're building the same model and we want them to have the same motion outcome for their robot, we can do that in these 3 different ways. So the top left here, where we have the select action, pincers, and hunt. So our goal here was to have the Scorpion click its pincers for one motion and then use its stinger and then close the pincers for the second motion. So the select action, when you see that, that's the pose, record, and play feature. So it's basically like stop motion animation or puppetry, where the student would move the robot, hit record on the app, move it again, hit record on the app, move it again, until they have the action completed. That action is then recorded in code, and they can pull that right in without having the individual blocks for their code. So that's a wonderful way for the younger students to start out, or students who have never coded before to get started. And then the second way I would have my students code is this bottom remote control feature. So students could create a wheel or a slider or a button, and then we still do the coding behind that. So what happens in the code whenever you push the button, they still need to code that, but it allows them to create a remote control to live control the robot. And then on the right, you can see the kind of the traditional or typical block code, where a student would control the motor's degrees and rotation and speed through the block coding. So I don't necessarily use these step 1, step 2, step 3. I kind of use them interchangeably, and I'll show you an example of that next. So this is the pose, record, play. This was an example whenever I wanted to teach my students about integers and creating a variable within their code. So this is an example where the students might have been a little more advanced in their coding, but we still use the pose, record, and play mixed in with the block coding. So they created the poses for rock, paper, and scissors with their robot using the pose, record, and play, but then they pulled those in to the block coding. And the reason I did that is so that they would focus on the logic of creating a variable and selecting a random integer, rather than focus too much on the poses, because we really wanted to teach them about how we create a variable. So depending on your learning goals, it's nice to be able to integrate those 3 different options for coding where your students are. So a little more about my own personal teaching experience. So I taught some camps virtually using the UKIT beginners, and these used the UBTECH curriculum, and you can see there they have the engineering design process, their version: identify, inquire, ideate, invent, investigate, and iterate. So that is used throughout camp. And this girl actually, this was her end of the camp robot, where she mixed a dinosaur and a scorpion together. So you can see how flexible it can be when students really get to imagining what they want to create. I had students ages 8 through 14 using this in the virtual environment. And really the the benefit was just that they were immersed immediately into building and coding robots, learning about examples of robots, learning about how that robot might function if it used artificial intelligence. And the main challenge for teaching virtually for a kit like this was just the technology troubleshooting and the building troubleshooting. Just because I couldn't go, oh, your Bluetooth's not turned on, and do it for them from across the United States. But those issues were, in the classroom, that's not an issue at all. And then even with those minor things, everyone had such a wonderful experience in camp. Students would spend extra time building their robots and coding because they were so excited at night. So you can really see their confidence over just a 5-day program with thinking like an engineer and building and coding. So here's a group of girls that I had virtually online, and we really went through thinking like an engineer and the cooperative learning aspects. So I was really impressed with their confidence by the end of the week. None of them had coded before. None of them had used robots before. With all the models that we built and the curriculum we used, I really stressed thinking like an engineer, and you could see them running through the checklist in their own head and then giving each other feedback. So you could, by the end of the week, they were asking each other, oh, did you make sure this your motors were plugged in, or that your servos were oriented correctly? And you could really see them starting to think like an engineer, which was really cool. So just the confidence building aspect of when everything's so seamless and whenever it's a good tool, it really let those students blossom. And I have this picture here of these two blue V-shaped pieces from the kit. So one thing I've started doing whenever I introduce students to the UKITs is I give them the opportunity to observe and kind of become the content experts. So I'm not just telling them, this is this piece, it does this. So I would hand them, for example, these two pieces and then ask them to identify the differences between them and what things are the same. So even things as small as that the left side of this piece has a smaller gap between the holes versus the other side. And that these are two different pieces, because we would have builds that would use both of these pieces, and then the students would, not really have a practiced eye with it. So they might mix them up and then they'd be disassembling and reassembling, which is its own lesson, of course. But I started to kind of introduce pieces in that way before we do a build, especially if it's a build that introduces new pieces, and kind of have them build their own knowledge before we utilize that in a build. So other than the UKITs, I've also used the AI Foundations curriculum from UBTECH. So the artificial intelligence curriculum, this is for K through 12. And it is based on the 5 pillars you can see there for artificial intelligence: perception, representation and reasoning, learning, natural interaction, and societal impact. And I implemented this with my 7th and 8th graders at a high poverty, high transience middle school. And it was a really engaging experience for my students. They were able to create their own machine learning, so training to learn the difference between 2 objects that they would hold up, like train a computer to see the difference between a mug and a pen. We did some coding. We did language translation in Google Translate, which was particularly relevant to my English language learner students. And then we had some really great conversations about bias and ethics. So they were really able to learn the positives of artificial intelligence and the things that artificial intelligence is good at, and then the things we need to watch out for in terms of if computers have bias and they're making decisions, what does that mean for society? And I chose to implement the AI Foundations because I find it so relevant for my students. I want them to be able to see the algorithm behind the curtain, really that, you know, if they're going down that YouTube rabbit hole and videos are getting recommended to them, or they're choosing something on Netflix or Spotify to consume, or they're using Google Translate, that they really see that there is an algorithm behind that, there is artificial intelligence behind that, and it's around them all the time. And then, of course, that's only going to become more ubiquitous in their lives as they get older. So it was a really engaging curriculum, super relevant to my students, and the activities really kept them interested because they were so relevant to their own personal lives. And one last implementation that I did was with the GMO tank bots. So there is the makerspace kits for GMU, the GMU champ bot, the competitive robots. They are interchangeable with the UKIT pieces. So I was able to, you know, we could combine these if I wanted to from the two different kits. And these had an infrared sensor in them. So I had my 7th and 8th graders work in pairs to build the robots and code them. And it's the same app, UCode app, as the UKITs use. And then just a couple organization tips is that I number and label all my robot kits. So the main control box, but also the motors, I'll bag those up and have students check those in and out, not to lose them. And then I also get on each robot, turn them on, get them connected to Bluetooth, and write down that Bluetooth ID number and put that right on the main control box, so that when we're connecting 12 robots at a time, we can tell whose robot is whose. And another thing I like to do is to keep one kit as my demonstration kit. So if I need to make the next thing we're making or show them something, and an extra parts kit for those pieces that they will inevitably lose. So that was part of our implementation. What we did here in the pictures, you can see we did a rescue mission. So we used the infrared sensor where that would need to detect when the tank bot got close to one of those little sponges. They needed to pick it up and then retrieve it. So this was one of the most fun activities we did all year. The students were really engaged. Everybody participated. Everybody got to code. Everybody was working together when there were issues to help each other build, help each other code. And some of them, again, even downloaded the app on their phones so they could code at home. And then as an extension from this, as a reward, we did some robot obstacle courses and races with the tank bots, which they can drive up ramps pretty well. And they can also do this exercise move where they can pick themselves up if they fall over. So that made the obstacle courses really fun. And kind of what I'll wrap up here with is a couple student examples. So this first one, this is a virtual student who, this isn't a very showy video, but I think it's a good example because it shows him going through the thought process of an engineer. So we'll start with that one.
Hi, my building tip is that whenever you get things stuck together, do not panic and take your time and get it apart. And whenever you're building or you're using your servos, make sure that you have your servos right. I can't speak. Make sure that you have your servos right and make sure that they are all connected. And that is my building tip for today. Okay. And also, yeah, that's what happened. This servo right here, servo ID 4, was not connected. And I'm wondering, why is it not moving? Because it wasn't connected. So that was the problem that I had today. That was one of the problems, actually. And then this little piece right here, whenever I was connecting this wheel, I'm not sure if it was this one or this one, but I know one of them, I did the step incorrectly and I did not put the bar through it. Anyway.
So I like that video because he clearly was thinking through what he did wrong and he wasn't getting frustrated. So if my students practice that through building robotics and then take that to all their other classes, I'm a very happy teacher. And then this also shows, I would kind of use, if you've used like Flipgrid or Seesaw or other tools like that where students can do video or draw in response, I would use that a lot. Where students would draw out their robots or do a video recording or take a picture of their robot and draw on top of it as a way to assess and check their understanding. So this last video, this would be an invention from the end of a week of virtual robotics camp.
Are you tired of cleaning?
Yes.
Are you tired of putting stuff in buckets?
Yes.
Well, then you need the Super Sweeper. The Super Sweeper is a smart, safe technology, and it can pick up from toothpaste to a bottle cap. It uses its plastic bristles to sweep up anything it sees. It uses smart, safe technology, so if you put your finger in, you won't get hurt. And it can even pick up toy cars. You can just shove it on in there, and it goes right up. It also has wheels, so if you you'll have so much fun driving it, and you can pick up from your brother's toys to your sister's toys. You'll have so much fun driving it, you'll forget you're cleaning.
I'm cleaning.
Yes, you are. And this is the Smart Safe Super Sweeper. In stores never, because it is not in production.
All right, that example makes me laugh. Anyway, we can move on to any questions you have.
All right, so any questions from anybody? I'm sorry if you had posted anything in the chat. I was having some technical issues on my end, so I completely lost everything in the chat. So now's your time to pop in if you'd rather speak and verbalize your questions. I'd be happy to turn on your microphones so we can all have a nice chat. That last video was hilarious. the disclaimer
I'm
at
cleaning,
the end.
yeah.
The disclaimer at the end had me rolling over here. There's got to be at least one question in there.
I heard someone else use some UBTECH robots too, UKITs. Which UKIT did you use and how did it go?
Yeah, definitely. Tell us your experiences. All right, Jennifer Coe, what is your recommendation for kits and how many you use in your classroom?
I like to do pair coding, and I'm sure Nick can jump in as well. You could do more than 2, you could do 3 or 4, and I think that would still work well. In the virtual setting, each student had their own just because of it was in the virtual setting, but whenever we did 2 students per kit, that worked extremely well.
So Patty is asking, and we talked about this before we started, but Patty is asking if you can share your Twitter handle. So
I don't have one. I'm a little bit, despite being a STEM teacher, I'm a little bit of a social media, but I can share my LinkedIn if anyone wants to connect on LinkedIn.
Definitely. That sounds great. We should do that. And have you found that the pose, record, play component of the UBTECH, does that really help the students kind of grasp the concepts that they're trying to do with that block coding?
Yeah, I think they don't see all the code that goes into that, but what they're doing is basically rehearsing it's forcing them to have the robot do what they want to do before they code it in that way because of the reverse. And it really plugs in well, and yeah, it gets them started. Most importantly, if they feel like they're not ready for that block coding, it gets them started, and then they see the results and they can still put it in the logic of the program, so they can focus on that logic and not worry if they have 4 motors to control, that can be a lot to start with. So it lets them control it in a different way and then still use the block coding as well.
Very cool. Let's see. Jennifer said, you said you did camps. Did you have any experience working with younger, older, or experienced new pairs?
I did with the virtual camps. I had siblings together and they would often be, 3 or 4 years apart. And so a lot of times it would be the younger student who would be more have the mindset to keep going and not get stuck, versus sometimes the older students would not have that growth mindset as much. And then they kind of have to share with each other and help each other out. But the kind of that mentorship with the experienced and new worked really, really well with the kits as well.
I am Patty. Patty said that they're using BattleBots. They're doing a BattleBots class using ChampBots. Week 1 was a success with 5th and 6th graders.
I love BattleBots. Yeah, I used to do that with sumo style. Yeah, that we would do BattleBots. Love it, Patty.
Awesome. Anybody else have any questions or any other awesome ideas or anecdotal accounts that you may have using, the ChampBot or any of the UKITs? Any questions about the AI foundations? To me, that's extremely interesting that they have a whole platform and curriculum for artificial intelligence. It seems like that is going to be a big component for students moving forward and moving on into the working class as well.
Absolutely. I like I said, I learned as much as I was learning right alongside them when we first implemented it, because I didn't know as much as I wanted to know about AI, and it's everywhere.
Sitting in your pocket every single day without thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Jennifer says that no experience using any of the AI tech. So this is really interesting. Yeah, it is a very, very interesting program. I've dipped my toes in a little bit, and it's really, really cool.
Matt, this is Nick with UBTECH. As far as the AI Foundations curriculum goes, we've created this as a standalone item for individuals to learn artificial intelligence, because a lot of what we do with coding and robotics incorporates artificial intelligence. And we've actually created 4 different grade bands for that curriculum. The first one starts as early as kindergarten, believe it or not, and it goes to 2nd grade. Our second grade band goes from grades 3 through 5. Our third one goes from grades 6 through 8. And then our 4th and final grade band is for high school students in 9th through 12th. And just a little summary about it. It does talk about the 5 principles of AI foundations, and each principle or each grade band will come with 2 units. And in each unit, there's a total of 5 lesson plans. So you get a total of 10 lesson plans per grade band. It is exceptional. It is very thorough, and it's a great way to have a progressional format to learning artificial intelligence, because we're not changing the 5 topics, but we are gearing it more towards the age group that fits into the grade bands.
Does anybody have any other questions, comments, jokes? Somebody tell us a joke. That'd be fun too. If we don't have any more questions for anybody, we're going to hang out here a little bit longer, but I definitely want to thank both Annie and Nick for helping us out today. And this thing here, got too much on the screen again. All right, so again, thank you so much, Annie, for joining us and helping us learn a little bit more how to use the UKITs and AI foundations with our students. Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get to catch the whole thing because Zoom decided to cut out on me several times, but adapt and persevere. It's what we got to do with technology sometimes. And nobody understands that more than our educators, especially after the year all of you just had. So
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And I did share my LinkedIn in the chat. So if any fellow STEM educators want to connect, especially if you're close by, absolutely do that.
Yep, certainly. Yep, anybody, feel free to reach out to Annie if you have any STEM questions. You can contact us at Maker Maven. I will give you some of that information here shortly. Again, thank you, Annie. Be sure you follow UBTECH on Twitter, and that's at UBTECH EDU. Why don't you join in and connect with Annie on LinkedIn? She shared her profile within the chat there. And also you can follow us on social media at maker_maven, which I believe is this shoulder. All right. Yes. No, got it. Cool. All right. So few different things that I would like to kind of reiterate here with UBTECH. So, UBTECH integrated STEM, UBTECH's curriculum integrates and exposes students to multiple subject matters and concepts through robotics, making robotics and coding applicable to any student in any environment. Vertical alignment by building problem-solving confidence and guiding students through scaled, grade applicable content. Students have the ability to use UBTECH hardware, software, and curriculum throughout their educational career. That scaffolding component is key, especially when teaching our students with these STEM tools. They don't have to learn something new at every level or as their skills progress. In real-world applications, as a leader in robotics and AI, UBTECH creates solutions that provide a pathway for students to excel in STEM careers. And I'm sure all of you know, but that really is the purpose of STEM and the whole maker movement, is to prepare our students and our youth for not the jobs of today, but the careers of tomorrow. So it's definitely very important to get those cross-curricular integrations, whether it be robotics, coding, engineering, programming, literacy, everything that you can will be rolled into one within tomorrow's jobs. So here's some of UBTECH's products that we do offer through Maker Maven. We have all three of the UKITs available. We also have the GMU, the ChampBot competitive series that we were talking about earlier, and Patty's doing some awesome BattleBots competitions with. We also have the GMU Robot Maker Kit if you're looking for more of a makerspace adaptation for those types of robotics. If you are looking to purchase or are interested in UBTECH or adding to your STEM or maker spaces, please feel free to contact us. Maker Maven would love to be your solution for all of your STEM needs moving forward. We not only provide you with the tools that you can use with your students in the classroom, in the library, after school programs, but also the support and resources to go along with them and help you integrate successfully into your current programs or the programs that you're looking to install in the future. So feel free to reach out to us at our website at www.makermaven.net. You can email us for any quotes, inquiries, purchasing options, submitting purchase orders at orders@makermaven.net. You can call or fax us at the same number, that is 877-625-3775. And again, feel free to contact us anyway, any of those options via Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram. If you can't get a hold of us, that's something wrong on our end, because we have a lot of options available for you. So I'm going to throw a bunch of links here in the chat for everybody. So everybody can contact us. Make sure you follow UBTECH. Make sure you follow Maker Maven. Check out our UBTECH collections on our website. And for any questions, please don't hesitate to call, email, again, fax, Twitter, Facebook, anything. We're so happy to have you. We enjoy putting on these webinars for our educators. So thank you for those of you that joined us for the first time today.